section this morning, and I'm going to be doing that from Deuteronomy chapter 20, verses 1 to 9. And I'll preface it by saying Dave will make complete sense of this afterwards. Deuteronomy 20. When you go to war against your enemies, you might see they have horses and chariots. They might even have an army stronger than yours. But don't be afraid of them. The Lord your God will be with you. After all, he brought you up out of Egypt. Just before you go into battle, the priest will come forward. He'll speak to the army and he'll say, "Men of Israel, listen to me. Today you are going into battle against your enemies. Don't be scared. Don't be afraid. Don't panic or be terrified by them. The Lord your God is going with you. He'll fight for you. He'll help you win the battle over your enemies." The officers will speak to the army. They will say, "Has anyone built a new house and not started to live in it? Let him go home. If he doesn't, he might die in battle. Then someone else will live in his house. Has anyone planted a vineyard and not started to enjoy it? Let him go home. If he doesn't, he might die in battle. Then someone else will enjoy his vineyard. Has anyone promised to be married to a woman but hasn't done it yet? Let him go home. If he doesn't, he might die in battle. Then someone else will marry her." The officers will continue, "Is anyone afraid or scared? Let him go home. Then the other soldiers won't lose hope too." The officers will finish speaking to the army. When they do, they'll appoint commanders over it.
Thanks, Peter. Morning, everyone. My name's Dave. I'm one of the associate pastors here. I also work for Red Frogs Australia. First of all, thank you, Peter, for jumping in today and giving the band a week off. This is fantastic. Can we thank Peter, actually? Can we do that? Thank you. I was just this week driving along in my car. I've got a couple of young adult sons, and they're always playing music in the house, and it's a particular style and genre, and it gets on my nerves a little bit after a little while. And this week I had to do a bit of driving, and I thought I'm going to listen to some classics. So I got a playlist on Spotify. I was listening to classics from the 1990s, Nirvana, Living End, Green Day, Wind Down Your Windows and Sing It Out Loud kind of stuff. This morning, for something different, we're listening to classics from the 1890s. But we're all got the windows down and we're singing with gusto, which is fantastic. And the band gets a rest. I actually saw my guitar kind of laying down like it's having a rest this week as well. Did anyone else notice that? I'm just going to put it up straight again. That's okay. That wasn't me. Just in relation to, on a serious note, what's gone down in schoolies with the Police Commissioner's son this week, and as you know, I'm kind of involved in that space. I'm about to head off to Bali for 9 days to work in that space with young people. It's an absolute tragedy, and our prayers are with all concerned, but I think what we aren't aware of is how many times, and what we can't count is how many times this hasn't happened because of the work of Encounter Youth down in Victor Harbour, the efforts that they go to make that a safe place and a fun place for Year 12s as they go off to celebrate this milestone is phenomenal. I was down there on Friday night. Rachel came with me. We got a behind-the-scenes tour from Encounter Youth and got to see the levels they go to protect young people. Bus services They're paying for bus services to get kids to and from the campsite, so there's less kids on the road and less kids driving, and first aid and medical tents, and it's just phenomenal. I just want to point out that Seb, our young adult and worship guy that works here on staff, he's actually down there serving with the green team this week. So there are actually a few Red Frog volunteers that spend all year doing uni ministry and then throw on a green jumper for the end of the year and go down and support the Schoolies Festival. So our thoughts are with them. So this morning, God wants to prepare us today for the challenges of tomorrow. That's the message which I'm taking out of Deuteronomy chapter 20. It's all about preparing for a new season. Who actually feels like this year that you've maybe ended a season in your life, or maybe you feel like maybe you're going into next year, you might be going into a new season of your life? Who's kind of got that sense? Who's had that sense just about a few things in life over the last couple of years? It's not like you've had a tough few months and then you go into another few months, but it's like seasons of life are changing and in significant ways. The passage I'm reading from today comes from the book of Deuteronomy. That's why we put the title up there. But it was written at the end of this 40-year-long, really tough season for the freed Israelite slaves of Egypt. So you kind of know the Moses Exodus story, and if you don't, this people group, the Israelites, they were in Egypt for about 400 years. They were slaves. God wanted to free them. Wanted to make them his people, and he sent Moses to help make that happen. Miracles, plagues, Red Sea parting, leading the Egyptians out of Egypt, and so they're freed. But then God says, and now I'm going to give you this whole other land, and you just go up there and take it off the people that are already there. They won't even be able to resist you. And everybody kind of went, oh, look, I mean, I saw all those miracles and everything you've just done and how you've saved us from Egypt, but we're not sure we believe you. And it kind of annoyed God, right? So he said, your whole generation, you're going to wander around in the desert for 40 years. All your kids are going to grow up and they're going to believe in me because they're going to live every day depending on me. But you guys are all going to die of old age. And when you're all died of old age, your kids are going to do what I promised to do for you, but you weren't interested in having the faith to live that out. So they've had this 40-year-long season in the wilderness, and now they're receiving God's instructions. This new generation, they're receiving God's instructions for walking into the promised land, for walking into this new season for these new people. I often actually return to this book of the Bible. I even return to this passage at various times in my life when I feel like I'm reviewing a recent season of my life or entering into a new one. And I thought, today we have our AGM, or our annual review meeting, of all that the church has done this year, and we look forward to all that we're doing next year. And I thought, this passage might work heading into that. So I'm hoping that the insights that we pull out of this passage today are going to be helpful and challenging and also encouraging for me and for you, but also for us as a whole church as we review our last season and we look into our next. I'm thinking about some of these new seasons some of you might be experiencing. I'm thinking about Mitch and Jesse or any of our other students. You've just been 13 years in high school and primary school and early education. That's a really long season of your life, and you've just come to the end of that season. It's so exciting now. You're looking at uni options or trade options or whatever it is that you're looking at, but it's clearly there's a shift. There's a shift in the way things were day by day, and you're moving into this new season. We have people that are moving into retirement. We have retirees that haven't been able to give up work because they're addicted to it, and they're moving into proper retirement. You know who you are. So that's a really important and exciting season of life. Time to buy the caravan or upgrade the caravan or upgrade the car that tows the caravan or whatever that might be, and see Rod about booking your spot down in Moana next year for our church camp, which I'm hoping to get along to with a few friends as well. And then there's this other season that I'm really familiar with at the moment, this transition of season, and it's when you kind of become an empty nester, right? So you've had this really difficult season, right? Your kids are teenagers and young adults, and it's so difficult. Every day, jocks on the bathroom floor, milk left empty, no petrol in the car when I go to drive the car. It's just so torturous. The music I was telling you about, what a difficult, challenging season. It must be exactly like these people walking around the wilderness for 40 years. And then all of a sudden, things change, the kids move out, or in our case, Rachel and I, if you don't know, we're about to move out. We bought an apartment in the city, we're leaving the kids in the house, and we're moving out. But it's empty nest season, or something like that anyway. It's a new season, and we're kind of starting to prepare ourselves for that. We've had, as a local church, over recent times, we've said goodbye to some really, really much loved and also highly contributing members of our church family. That's been our experience over this year, and it's been difficult. We've also welcomed on new staff to the team in the most recent season. I've been here 5.5 years on staff. I think I'm about to have my 7th Christmas at Knightsbridge or something. None of the staff that I currently work with were here working with me 2 years ago. In fact, none of them were actually part of the church community 2 years ago. We've gone through a real change there as well. And so we're kind of receiving God's instruction. We want to receive God's instruction to walk into the future as a special people of God in this neighbourhood where He's placed us. We want to meet Him in this new season out in our neighbourhood. So your last season actually shaped you, and it did shape our church, but now God wants to instruct and prepare you and prepare us to walk into what He's got. So let's get into that. I've drawn a few points in typical Simon Chen tradition. I've drawn some key points that have jumped out of this passage, and I'm going to pick through them one at a time. I think he picks 3 points, is that right? I think I've picked 4. Probably should have picked 2 because we've got an AGM afterwards, but anyway, bear with me. Let's see how we go. My first point is about being battle ready. Being battle ready. This whole passage starts chapter 20, verse 1, and it says, when you go into battle. And I would think, hang on, God, when? Shouldn't it say if or maybe if? Why does it say when? We've just had the hard season, we're going into the promised season, right? Why is it when you're going to... That means there's going to be battles, right? There's going to be challenges. I think we all have battles and challenges. We're all going to have battles and challenges in our next season, whether it's a good season or otherwise. And the message here in Deuteronomy, effectively the whole book of Deuteronomy, but also this passage, is that you want to be prepared for the challenges of the next season before you're in the challenges of next season. That's the wisdom, to be prepared beforehand. Moses is using this really good moment as an opportunity to prepare the people. So just to set the scene a bit more, that they are more or less sitting on the side of a mountain, on the edge of the wilderness, ready to move into the promised land, and they can see the promised land. If you can imagine just sitting there on the slopes, seeing what God's promised you, but you're at peace, you're at rest. You've got all your needs met by God, and this is the best moment to actually think about preparing yourself for the next season. It's better to prepare and plan and make decisions about how we intend to conduct ourselves when we're in a good place. It's better than trying to do it when the pressure's on, right? Planning a way forward when challenges and battles have already started isn't as effective as if you've had some time to think about it when things aren't so tense and so stressed. I spend a lot of time with young people, obviously in my job, young men as well, and when you're a young man, you're in the dating game, right? That's often the case, and you have to make some decisions about how you're going to conduct yourself. Young women do this as well. I don't often talk to young women in this space personally, but when I'm talking to young men, how you're going to conduct yourself in your relationship with your girlfriend or potential girlfriend. The time to decide how you're going and make decisions about that is not when you're with your girlfriend in the movie cinema in the dark, right? The time you decide about that is when you're prayed up and you're full of the Word and you've got that moment to actually think about the kind of reputation you want, the kind of respect you want to have for a potential girlfriend, a potential partner. You prepare in the cool light of the day for what may come at you in the heat of the night. Does that make sense? So, what battles and challenges do you face in your lives? What are the battles and challenges that you might face in your life in the next season? Relational problems on the horizon, or financial pressures potentially, seen or unseen? Career challenges, study challenges, exams or assignments, or studying in a new field? Spiritual struggles? It's actually really silly to think that we won't face these battles and challenges in our next season. We are going to, so we need to be prepared for them. But what about as a church? What are we facing? What's around the corner? Have we spent time to sit and think about that? One example that every church faces, one battle, one struggle, one challenge is against fear. It actually takes boldness from a church to keep a church moving forward into God's purpose. You need to battle that fear. And we need to battle against it, because we all have this urge to, kind of like a default position, to play things safe. We play things safe while we have it look like we're doing the right thing. That's in everybody, but it's in church as well. We need boldness to keep the church moving forward into God's promises. One illustration of this, I look at the battle with David and Goliath. Who knows about the battle with David and Goliath? Yeah. If you read about that, and you don't necessarily need to look it up now, I won't read all of it, but in 1 Samuel, around chapter 17, this is later on down the track, in the land of Israel, the Israelites are fighting this army called the Philistines. I don't know, we should vote on how to pronounce that, but there's this big giant from the Philistines that comes out every day and challenges and taunts the Israelite army. And the Israelite army will get up every morning and they will put on their battle gear and they will line up in battle formation and they will shout these battle cries and they will do all their preparations and they'll stand out on the battlefield, and then Goliath will come out and he will, big giant, come out, challenge the army, and then they'll all go back to their camp, right? And it says here that this happened for 40 days in a row. 40 days in a row. And then young David comes along his father actually sends him down to the battle to take some food for his older brothers who are actually soldiers in the Israelite army. And he arrives and he's asking people what's going on, and he hands the food over and he wants to know, what's going on here? What's going on? And he sees Goliath do his thing and he sees the response from the army, and he really wants to know, and he kind of wants to be involved. And his older brother, I'll just read that passage. It's 1 Samuel 17, verse 28. His older brother, Eliab, says, "When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, 'Why have you come down here? And with whom do you leave those few sheep in the desert? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle.'" David was very gracious in the way he responded. If I was David, I would have said, "What battle? What battle? What battle? Every day you put on all your battle clothes, every day you march in battle formation, every day you say your battle chants and do your instructions and you line up. You don't battle though. You look like an army. You look like soldiers. You're kind of putting on a show like soldiers, but every day that see something that's fearful, you just go back to camp. But you'll come back and do it again the next day. What battle? I think every church needs to battle against the urge to slip into religiosity, to slip into what I call churchianity. It's not Christianity, it's churchianity. It's about doing church. It's about putting on your Sunday clothes and sitting in your pews and singing the right hymns or songs or whatever it might be. But it kind of becomes nothing more than playing dress-ups if we're not also taking on the real battles, if we're not taking on the real challenges, if we're not confronting those things that we're afraid to step into, if we're not doing the things that God asks us to do in our community and beyond and around. It can become much like that. Fearfully clinging on to religiosity is just one example of the battles that you have to face as a church, and there are going to be others. But if we decide on our good days how we're going to conduct ourselves on our bad days, when the heat is on, we're going to be more battle ready. My second point, follow the leaders, plural. Follow the leaders, plural. I actually see in this passage that all the advice, the encouragement, the direction, it actually came from multiple leaders, not just one. I'll just point out what we're looking at here. And I'm not saying there's like a hierarchy. That's not even what it's about here. You've got different leaders speaking into different aspects of their lives. Moses is the one who's actually written this instruction down. He's speaking to the whole community. He has the priests come forward. He has commanders come forward and say things after that. After all that's happened, the commanders appoint basically sergeants to the different divisions to instruct the soldiers during war. There's all these different leaders involved at all different levels and for all different reasons. It actually, I have to be honest, it takes humility for me to accept that I'm not the font of all wisdom and then submit to one leader. Right? It takes humility for me to do that. Don't laugh, Pastor Simon. He's not laughing, it's okay. But it's going to take a whole lot more humility for me to realise that I might not even be the second best cook in the kitchen, or the third, or the fourth. To actually submit myself to a number of people, to mentor me, to disciple me, to lead me, to employ me. But you notice here the advice isn't to just do what the priest says, or in our case, say the senior pastor. That isn't the advice here. There's a whole bunch of different leaders for different purposes and different reasons, and it's a good example for us. Can I ask you a question? Would you get Pastor Simon to do your tax returns? Anyone here want to get Pastor Simon to do their tax returns? Anyone want Pastor... Someone did? Does anyone want Pastor Mary to renovate their kitchen? Anyone want Pastor Mary to renovate their kitchen? Some time ago, before I was a member of this church, Rachel and I were investigating the potential to go into a small business. We were very keen amateur horse trainers and enthusiasts and riding instructors. Like, we kind of had that thing going on, and we had an opportunity to go and take a lease on an equestrian centre out the back of Golden Grove towards One Tree Hill. And we kind of wanted some advice about whether we should do that or not, given the season we're in our life. And we actually went and spoke to our pastor about it. Our pastor was a very nice guy, and he was very caring, and he was very well-meaning, and he knew nothing about small business, and he knew nothing about horses. But we asked him for advice about whether we should get involved in this business. It didn't go very well for us, this business. We decided to do it, and it didn't go very well for us. We're not actually blaming the pastor for that. We're blaming who it was that we sought counsel for about that, right? I speak from experience that it's not a great place to put all of your expectations and some unreasonable expectations on your pastors. We can speak to that from experience. If you do put all of your expectations as a church on your pastors or just your staff alone, they're probably going to disappoint you at some stage, because they are human. And it won't be their fault that they disappoint you necessarily, because they don't want all of your hopes pinned on them. They want all of your hopes pinned on Jesus. And Simon's actually said it 100 times from the pulpit, and yet we still do it 100 times, that we need to put our hope on Jesus. Some people, we kind of think our pastors are paid to be the leader of our church, but also they're paid to be our best friend, and they're also paid to be our career advisor, or, who knows what else. Let's not do that. I think the message here is our church is going to grow and reach others through a range of different people giving their gifts and talents to the mission. That's one body and many parts the Bible speaks about later. It's not wise or fair or God's intention for any church to rely too much on too few people. And that wisdom's here in a scriptural text that's over 3,000 years old. I think that's helpful for us. The third point, supporting from the sidelines. Know how and when to support from the sidelines. There's that section, verse 20, it kind of started to get a bit interesting. It's not verse 20, chapter 20, verse 5. The officers shall say to the army, has anyone built a new house and not dedicated it? Let him go home, or he may die in battle. Someone else may dedicate it. Has anyone planted a vineyard? Similar. Has anyone become pledged to a woman and not married her? Same again. Is any man afraid or faint-hearted? Let him go home so that his brothers will not become disheartened as well. One way of kind of summarising the section might be to say, this section is saying go hard or go home. Go hard or go home. You know that saying? I don't think it's as simple as that. I don't actually think that that's necessarily what's being said. I think God is actually acknowledging here that there will be some seasons in the lives of some people in our church where they just won't be up for the fight, and for legitimate reasons. In this passage, God sends some people off to the sidelines. It's not for punishment, but it's actually with his permission, with his blessing. In fact, the bigger point here is that some people have had their permission to be in the battle withdrawn with God's blessing. Now, partly, and it's written here because God doesn't want these people in these situations distracting and discouraging the soldiers who remain. That's really important. But also in a practical sense, the army still needs food. The army still needs resources produced. Even the population rate needs to kind of keep ticking along, if you know what I'm saying there. So being prepared for battles also means being prepared for how you'll conduct yourself when you're not up for the fight, when you're not in the fight, when you're not in a place where you can get your hands dirty. How do you conduct yourself in those situations? We've got our AGM on after this. I've mentioned that. I think I've made the joke before. If we're at the AGM and I ask for volunteers for who can help the worship and production team because we're short-staffed, we might get like one volunteer, be really happy just for one more member for the production team, and that might be the reality. But if I asked everyone for volunteers for a committee to decide what songs we should sing on Sunday, that's the picture up there. There it is. We've got the United Nations of advisors and diplomats turn out to join this committee and contribute in that way. It's a bit of a joke, but I think God doesn't want anyone here to wrongly believe that their greatest contribution to this church is their opinion. I was going to say that. I've been in that situation before, but I honestly think I don't see it anywhere in Scripture. I don't think anyone's greatest contribution to this church is their opinion. If you're going to an AGM and there's a matter that's being discussed or an issue that's being discussed and you haven't prayed for the people involved, so it's about the worship team. If you haven't prayed for the worship team, personally, if you haven't considered and sought God's input on the issue or matter, don't say anything. That's okay. It's okay to actually remain silent for that part of the meeting. In fact, it's biblical. It's better than okay. Any church that's like full of a lot of opinions but little else isn't going to win the battles for God, isn't going to take ground for his kingdom, isn't going to convince anyone here that's seeking to get to know Jesus that there's something special and different about his community than any other community or committee or organisation out there. If you find yourself for a season weighed down with distractions in life, like career or home matters or relationships, by all means, give that stuff to God. Put God first thing over all things in your life. But if you can't get on top of these challenges, just be praying for the church's mission, and just be giving to the church's mission, and just be encouraging those who are actually doing the work in the mission, all while humbly just stepping back with opinions and concerns and complaints, because those in the front line don't need to be discouraged or distracted. That's a very clear message in this passage here. I think I've got one last point. And this is the best one. The Lord fights for you. The Lord fights for you. All that stuff that I've just talked about actually sounds really hard. It is really hard. From personal experience, I know. Being prepared for challenges in advance, trusting ourselves to multiple leaders, knowing when to sit out, knowing when to speak up and when not to. That all sounds really hard, believe me, I know. But the real message through this passage comes from a couple of places. First of all, verse 1. When you go to war against your enemies and see horses, chariots, and an army greater than yours, don't be afraid of them, because the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt will be with you. Don't be afraid of all this stuff, because the Lord will be with you. And then again in verse 3 and 4, the priest says, "Hear, Israel, today you're going into battle against your enemies. Don't be faint-hearted or afraid. Don't be terrified or give way to panic before them, for the Lord your God is the one who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies." It was such an important point that it's actually repeated twice in the first 4 verses. God goes with us. Let's fast forward here 1,200 years from the time that Moses is sitting on the side of a mountain instructing the Israelites. And we've got Jesus sitting on the side of the mountain instructing his disciples, instructing them for their next seasons ahead, their next battles and challenges, and how to live a life of faith and advance the gospel. You see, the disciples actually, they all thought Jesus' instructions sounded really hard too. But Jesus actually disagreed with them. Jesus said, these instructions aren't hard. These instructions aren't hard to follow. These instructions are impossible to follow. I'll read you the passage. I won't read all of it, but there's this rich young man. He's got it all together, and he follows all these teachings of Moses, right? And he's in a discussion with Jesus, and basically he's telling Jesus about how he follows all of Moses' instructions. And Jesus says to the guy, "Well, if you want to be perfect, go and sell your possessions and give it to the poor, and you'll have treasure in heaven. And then come follow me." And when the young man heard this is from Matthew 19 if you want to read it later. When the young man heard this, he went away because he had great wealth. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "I tell you the truth, it is hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, I tell you, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God." When the disciples heard this, they were greatly astonished and asked, "Who then can be saved?" This is so hard. This is crazy. And Jesus looked at them and said, "With man, this is impossible." With man, this is impossible. Not hard, impossible. But then Jesus says, "But with God, all things are possible." With God, all things are possible. Living with faith, the faith that God asks of a church that is on mission in the place where they're planted, means doing hard things because God said so. Not because we think we can do it or because it's easy for us to do. If it was easy and made complete sense, it wouldn't actually require any faith for us to do it, would it? We wouldn't be called a community of faith if we were just doing the easy stuff we're comfortable with. I've heard Pastor Simon mention this point all through this series that he's currently preaching on the book of Acts. Without faith in God, without Jesus, without the Holy Spirit, this is actually all pointless. Absolutely pointless. And I agree. That was true for the Israelites back in Moses' day. That was true in the book of Acts. That was true for Jesus and his disciples. It's true for us at KBC today. Everything that the Bible has to teach us points us back to one absolute truth. We need Jesus. I'm going to close it up now. I'm going to summarize. Do you know Jesus? Do you believe in Jesus? Do you have faith in Jesus? Do you trust him with the difficult things he's asking? Can we commit to have Jesus help us prepare in the cool light of day for the battles and challenges that will come tomorrow? Pray to him, read his word, listen to his Spirit. Can we commit to have Jesus bless us with guidance from multiple leaders and mentors and disciplers that will come along and help us grow and help us succeed? And if we find ourselves not personally up for the battle in any given season, for whatever reason that is, can we faithfully and humbly get out of the way, but remain as prayers and encouragers and resource providers so that we can lift up and not hold back the church's mission? God is calling Knightsbridge into a new season. He always is. He always is. Jesus is inviting us and preparing us to claim our place as his people in this community in new and fresh and exciting ways, over and over and always. Let's be godly in how we respond. Let's be prepared for his glory. Amen. Thank you.